Okay, so this video will go over how to set up the rover, which is the smart end of the stick, if you will. That's the one you carry around on the site. So after you've set up the base, like we showed in a previous video, you're going to be brought into a map screen like this. So here we're just going to hit that home menu, go into that GPS menu, and then connect. And then here we're going to look for, to make sure that we're in a rover mode up top, that the connection type is Bluetooth, that the Bluetooth device, that's going to be the last serial number of the item, and this unit that I have here has not been found yet as a rover, so we're going to scan for the Bluetooth device. And while it's actually doing that, talk a little bit about site control and things like that. So for that to happen, typically on a small site without any working with real surveyors, if there's no control points or anything, you have to come up with a way to put a grid onto your site typically. And the way that we do that here is we are going to perform in a second what's called a one-point calibration, where you're actually going to travel to a known point on the site that you want to be at a given coordinate system, so at a particular coordinate. So in this instance, well, here, just to get back to the rover setup, we're just going to pick number 80. That'll take a second to connect. But and so as part of that, you need to kind of come up with a coordinate system that's going to work for your site. So you pick one particular point, and then that's going to be set at coordinates that you type in this calibration. So here we're just going to kind of finish the setup of the rover here as the instrument goes through. And remember, we set up the base using BaseAnywhere, so the rover is going to be the same. It's going to be BaseAnywhere, and then that'll take a second to configure. But for these main control points, you're going to want to find one spot where you're going to set to be kind of the origin of your site. And in that instance, we pick Wi-Fi here for that. And in that instance, we're going to go ahead and come up with kind of reasonable numbers that are positive so that we don't go into a negative number. So for example, you might pick a corner of your site and call that, have a northing value of 1,000 and an easting value of 5,000. And we just type that in as we go here. So this is, GPS is still looking to find the base unit, which is over there. The corrections, and that the serial number, I had to switch receivers, but that's the correct serial number. So that's number 64 over there. I had to look for corrections for a minute, and then once we know it's connected up, it's there. But so for site control, the first step is that you're going to want to have a point that you're going to put a nail or maybe a little bit of a stake or something at the site, and then that'll be your kind of universal main control point throughout the site. So here I've just got a survey nail with a piece of flagging on it. So just a typical, what they call a PK nail, or you can even use as regular nails. Or if you're in grass, you get some 10 pennies or even larger nails, and just nice to tie a piece of flagging on it so that you can see, find it a little bit later. So once you have that in the ground, we're going to be able to use that as our one-point calibration. So after the rover gets set up here, and you can see that took a couple minutes, that'll be quicker once it's performed once. But now that we can just have our rover set up, it's complete, and do we want to calibrate the site? So yes, we're going to hit yes. Here in this instance, this is where you actually pick those origin coordinates. So I'm just going to call this point right here 5,000, 1,000, and then call that an elevation of 100. And the reason you use 5,000 and 1,000 is the fact that you have a different leading digit, so that you know if you're, what coordinate system you're in. So anything that kind of is in the realm of the 5,000s, I know will be in the northings, and in the 1,000s will be in the eastings, and I just called that a nice 100 value of elevation. So these are the type of settings that you end up using here, and the default settings are going to be fine, especially that minimum measuring time. So that's just going to cook away for 15 seconds as it's taking an average of its position right over that point. So I've plumbed the rod. It's on my bipod here, and there's a bubble level on this, so I just have that leveled in there. So after that 15 seconds, it's going to ask if we want to save the base station location as a control point. And when you're using BaseAnywhere, that's actually not necessary, and especially with BaseAnywhere, you're going to be moving that around quite a bit, so you don't need to save that as a control point. On the screen, if I hit kind of a zoom extents, which is that arrow button there, the magnifying glass with the arrows, we'll see that there's a little triangle present now. And if I want to, I can turn on some items that will help me display the point names and the point elevations. I get to that by hitting that little gear icon, and that now that has a point name of start, or our typical base first control point, and the elevation of 100. So the next thing that you have to do always when you're on a brand new site is you have to measure and set another control point. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to jump off here and get my hammer, and then we're going to run over just to another arbitrary point. It can be anywhere on site. You probably want to have it a couple at the margins of your site, so that you have a good amount of distance between the 2 points. So for the example here, probably won't be doing that, but I'm just going to kind of walk away a little bit. Set my nail in the ground. Put the rod on it. Get that nice and plumb. And if we zoom out again, hit that zoom extent, you'll see that we've moved due south from there. So what we got to do now is measure another control point. So to do that, we're going to hit the home menu, GPS, and then just measure control point. That'll get us into the correct mode setting, and then we're just going to hit measure at the lower right. And here we're going to call this CP1, and then the code. This usually isn't necessary depending upon what you're going to be doing, but that actually helps you to identify the point. So there's a point name and then a point code, and that typically can be things like a corner point, control point, if you had manholes, edge of pavement, edge of driveway, etc. But so we'll hit that. All these defaults are there, and we're just going to let that cook away again for 15 seconds. And after that's done, that kind of concludes what you need to do on every site in terms of being able to set up your base and rover. So we set up the base. We shouldn't have to do that more than once, so you can just come onto a site, turn that base on, set it anywhere as long as that isn't going to move. And then we'll end up going into the rover setup for that first point, where we're going to set our very first control point, perform that 1-point site calibration, call that whatever kind of origin coordinate system that you did. Here we use 1,000, 5,000, and then need to set at least one more control point so that we can do what's called checking in that we'll cover in another video for when you come back to that site. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here, as that concludes the very first setup of your rover on a site.